Good morning.
Morning.
How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing so well. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. I'm so excited about the fact that we get a holiday coming up. I'm going to take some
Uh,
time off.
Absolutely. Well, Sherelle, I want to thank you so much for joining us here today. We have quite a few people that are watching and listening from the firm, and I'm really excited to have the opportunity to talk to you. Because not everyone may have been given the information, I wanted to give you a brief introduction. Just so everyone knows, you are the Principal and Chief Operating Officer of BPM. BPM is one of the largest accounting and consulting firms in California and is a top 50 firm in the United States. You have more than 35 years of experience in the industry. And you also, and I have your bio, but I'm not going to go through it because it would probably take me the entire hour to go through the bio. But just a few of your amazing accomplishments. You serve on the board of directors for Big Brothers, Big Sisters of Orange County, the Orange County Pacific Symphony, the President's Advisory Board of Concordia University, the Board of Advisors Center for Leadership for Cal State Fullerton, and the Center for Investment and Wealth Management Advisory Board. And that's just a few of the boards that you serve on. And you also, outside of the office, are the founder of a speaker series for women called Leadership in Heels. And I know we'll talk more about that later, but you support the professional growth of women and also contribute to many nonprofits through that organization.
Yeah.
Now, you and I met about a year ago. I want to kind of explain to people how this came to be and how we came to be connected. And we met in a professional capacity. I think you were actually looking for Leadership in Heels to have another speaker or to get me involved in the organization. And I'll never forget sitting down for coffee with you when we met to just talk about life and everything. And we just instantly connected and said,
Right.
we don't know what it's going to be. We don't know how it's going to happen, but we're going to work together in some capacity. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. It was natural. It was like a natural, just the way that we actually intersected with one another. It's like two girlfriends that had known each other forever. So it was fabulous. From both the
Absolutely.
business and professional perspective. And I'm glad that we stayed connected.
Absolutely. And I don't think either one of us would have anticipated that this would be the way in which we would come together, right?
Not at all.
And I want to have a conversation today, and that's what this is going to be about. It's going to be a conversation involving race and racism, topic that I think can be very uncomfortable, especially for white people. And that's okay. I'm ready to get uncomfortable, and I'm going to want to be authentic and open. And, we've solicited questions from members of my team that I'll, as we start talking, I'll weave in as appropriate. But I just really feel like now's the time for us to learn first and also to take action. But I wanted to ask you, as a Black woman growing up here in California, to talk about your experiences with racism as a Black woman.
Well, first, I just want to tell you that I applaud you for the courage of even reaching out and being willing to have this uncomfortable conversation for the sake of change. Because as you know, in order for us to create change, everybody's got to get uncomfortable. So I applaud you for doing that. And I also want to say that I applaud you for doing that in the presence of your entire firm so that you can create the space where people feel comfortable to ask these questions, seek to understand, learn, grow, and hopefully change. So I do appreciate that because as an African-American woman, been a single mom for 17 years. I have 3 Black sons. My oldest is 29, my middle is 27, my youngest is 20. And raising them in South Orange County has been both rewarding as well as challenging. And my challenges are different from what your challenge would be because I have a number of challenges simply because my sons are Black. And what that means is that both personally, the things that I've experienced in terms of corporate America And then the things that I experienced just as a Black mom across the board, the foundation of it all comes from fear. And so trying to live a successful life in a wonderful community that I selected because it was safe, so to speak, lots of opportunity, also comes with the challenges of every time my sons walk outside, I'm afraid. You know, I have to ask my children to make sure that they not only checked in when they were young, but I have a 29-year-old son who's married and is a new homeowner. And I just had to remind him, baby, I know that you're grown. I know that you have your wife. I know that you have your own home. But I need you to make sure that I can have peace of mind and I can sleep. And when you get in, can you just let your mom know that you're okay? That's something that people don't understand. That's a challenge. And I'll also say, because I know we're going to talk a lot about a lot of different things, but I will also say that as an African American, I'm not like you. I'm not like so many other people in that culturally we communicate different, we act different, we show up different. And so there has always been this unspoken expectation for me to change in order to make other people feel uncomfortable. And I'm not saying that other people don't go through that with different other areas of their life. But as a Black person, it's an immediate perception from 90% of the people that I encounter that I am going to be a particular way, or I'm going to act a particular way, or I'm going to feel a particular way. In other words, I'm not given the freedom to just be. And that can be very, very challenging among a lot of other things. But it's been, it's scary, it's hard. You know, I was telling you the other day, it's hard. You know, my son went through an incident on a field trip and being stopped by the police because you're driving while Black, being asked, what are you doing in a certain neighborhood when you live there? I mean, it's so many things.
Now,
It's so many things, Dee.
now, when your boys were young, I mean, and I think talking about this in South Orange County, I mean, there is not a large Black population, African American population.
Not at all.
You know, you still had fear.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, you know, it's interesting because I moved to the city I live in because at the time when I moved here, it was like one of the safest cities in the nation, quite
Right.
frankly. And safe in terms of crime, and they're not really having any, safe in terms of great schools, but yet not safe for me, not safe for my kids. And we shouldn't have to experience that. You know, when my son was in middle school, he was on a field trip. And they were at an outdoor museum type place where they did historical history, and they talked about slavery days, and they had different stations at the location, and there were hundreds of children, and he was the only Black. And when they got to a particular station where they had the simulation of where they hung the slaves in front of all of the children, they said, well, we have a volunteer. And they called out my son, the only Black child on the field trip. Had him stand on a boulder that was large but yet shaky, and then told him to put his head in a noose while they demonstrated how they hung the slaves. I didn't even know the level of discrimination my son had been going through that entire 8th grade year at that school until after that incident happened. And my son, being a very good student, loved school, the following morning, it never said anything to me. I later learned that he had mentioned it to his brothers, and his brothers said, well, you know, that's just what you have to deal with to be out here. It's going to be okay. And they never told me. And then after a few days, my son was saying he didn't want to go to school. And he was sick. The next day, I thought nothing of it because he never really missed school. And then a few days later, when he still didn't want to go, he sat on the side of my bed and he cried. And that's bananas because my son is 20. And I'm sorry, Dee.
Don't be sorry.
And I remember it like it was yesterday. He sat on the side of my bed and he said, I can't go to that school, Mom, because I'm Black. And I called, I went up to the school, and I was sharing with them what had happened. It was a really big deal. It was all over the paper. It was a disaster. But anyway, the bottom line is, this is somewhat professional, I'm sorry. But the bottom line is, it ended up becoming just a big deal. And at the time, I wasn't sure what career move I was going to make. I was actually had an opportunity to go and work with a firm really within the legal industry. And we had calls from Gloria Allred. It was going to be this big deal. And it was during the time when the Clipper owner had the big deal going on. And all I wanted to do was get an understanding of why my son had experienced what he experienced. And I later found out from the parents of other kids that my son was being discriminated against on a consistent basis. And it was devastating. I ended up homeschooling my son for the rest of the school year, and then he graduated. It was his 8th grade year. But, the bottom line is that all of this is because my son was Black. It wasn't because my son was bad or because my son was disobedient, because my son was rude or he wasn't kind. It wasn't because my son was disruptive or he was a problem or because he wasn't a good student. It was because my son was Black. And that's not reasonable.
No, I mean, do you feel, obviously, everything that you've accomplished, both, as a mother and professionally, that you had to work 10 times as hard.
Oh, it's
as a white person.
It's just the expectation. There's my middle son is a football player. Now, all of my boys are doing exceptionally well. They all did very well in school. They all got full ride athletic scholarships. They're great young men. They're great citizens. And at the end of the day, I always wanted to be the kind of mom that my kids would want to marry. And I wanted to raise the kind of sons that I would want to marry, that any woman would want to marry. I wanted them to be great citizens, contributors to their community, have a moral compass, operate with a level of integrity, lead with authenticity, be honest, do right by others. And the unfortunate side of that is you could do all of that and yet not have a right to earn that in return. And again, I use the term earn because I'm not saying that it has to be given, but you can't even get in return that which you give depending on the situation. Now, don't misunderstand me. It's certainly not all people, because most of my friends are white. My kids' friends are white. Both my sons have white girlfriends. We are completely interracial family. But at the same token, they do have to have those talks about when you get in the car, what do you do if you get stopped by the police? You do have to have those conversations about how to behave when you go out with certain people because of the color of your skin. There are ways that we have to nurture and raise our children that are different from the way that you have to raise yours. You don't have to have those conversations. When I sit with my other executive friends and we talk about the conversations that I have to have with my sons, they're like, well, I never had that conversation with my son. Well, I bet you didn't, and we have those conversations because your child will never have to face that, thank God. Right. So it definitely requires a whole nother level of training and development and tolerance and patience. And what has happened in the world is that we're tired. People are just tired. It's just all we want to do is be humanized. That's it.
And that's what, I was going to ask about, why is this happening now? There's so much going on in the world. Everything from, the pandemic to all of the racial incidents that have occurred just over the past, 30 days. What is it about what's going on now with our climate that's really bringing us to the forefront and leading to change?
I think it has a lot to do with COVID-19, and I'm grateful for COVID-19 for a number of reasons. I think it is causing us to dig deep and really start to look at ourselves and how we've been living our lives. And I believe that as a result of that, we were really put in a position to really see ourselves. We were able to see ourselves as a result of how much we give away to others instead of our families, because once you were sheltering in place, you were faced to see exactly what kind of life you were truly living versus what you were saying. We were able to look at how we were allocating our time. And then I think it really caused us to now look at how we lead with our heart or not. And as a result of everybody being at home, you were forced to see what's been going on in this nation since slavery. And because Black men are dying on a regular basis all day, every day across the nation. But we have become so desensitized to what happens to anyone other than our own that we haven't been paying attention. But I think that because we were at home and more people are on social media, more people are watching television, more people are communicating with one another, that the visibility really hit the masses as a result of that. Coupled with the fact that I believe that the young generation in general, the generation X, Y, Z, I mean, they are far more integrated than our generation. You know, they have intersected with one another as a result of social media across the world. And the common denominator for them, I believe, is fashion and music. And as a result of them being connected socially, they have already become more accepting of one another. So with the visibility of what happened with so many who have been killed, from Breonna Taylor to George Floyd, and people seeing that, there was an uproar. And as a result of that, Black people have always been tired, but our voice has never been enough, because we need you. We need white men. We need these families to come and stand up on our behalf alongside of us and walk with us, just like I want to walk with you to help create whatever change you want to create within your organization, within your life personally. We needed you. And so as a result of this, I think that the reason why it's gaining so many traction is because the younger generation stood up. And they decided that we are going to stand for something and stand alone versus stand for nothing and stand in a crowd. And when they stood up one by one, it started to really magnify across the world. And as a result of that, there are a number of people who have said enough is enough. And then there are people like you who may not have really ever recognized the impact that this was having on the Black lives, and are starting to question, well, am I a racist? Am I a non-racist or an anti-racist? What am I? And start to have these really uncomfortable conversations around getting to know yourself and how you can then play a role in creating some change. So I'm grateful to COVID-19. I am grateful for sheltering in place. I am grateful for the younger generations, because together we can truly create some change, as long as we don't do it because it's the end thing to do. And we make sure that this is a sustainable movement so that we can actually have some change.
Right. I think a lot, I mean, for me personally, you're right, being at home, you know, and seeing everything much more, and not having such a hurried life, right? Everyone's not having as much of a hurried life as we used to. I know for me, it's really caused me to take a look within, and to take a look. And, you know, one of my closest friends in the world is one of my college friends, who's an African-American man. And we've been close for 35 years. And I had a conversation with him last week, during that conversation, where I started asking him about, okay, race and how he was raised. And he said, you know, this is the first time in 35 years you and I have ever discussed my race. And of course, the response that came to mind was, which I think a lot of white people, you know, or non-Black people feel, is that, well, we don't see color, right? I was raised not to see color, to treat everybody equally. But, you know, in conversations with you and with him, I was told, you know what, you want us to see your color.
And quite frankly, it's not true. You do see color. You just don't feel comfortable saying it because you don't know what to say. And so people say, well, we don't see color. Well, yeah, you do. When you walk in the room, you see color. You see that I'm Black. When my big 6'2", 235-pound Black son that has a baritone voice with dreadlocks down to his butt walks in the room, they see a Black man, period. And I just think that it's the lack of familiarity around the differences that we have. And instead of trying to understand who we are, we ignore it. And that's what I mean, and how I think that Black people have been so dehumanized, because in order to feel the pain of someone else, you have to feel something for the person. And not to say that we don't have our individual relationships, like you and your really close friend, or you and I, but as a race, a lot of people have not really allowed themselves to intertwine with the African-American race. And so it's why if a Black movie, which is what people will say, comes out at the movies, white people don't go see it. They say, well, that's a Black movie. But when Black people go to the movies, we never say that's a white movie. We just go to the movies. Right. But there has been this separation that I think people don't even realize since slavery. And even though people will say, I don't see color, if you didn't see color, you would go to the movie that you coined as a Black movie because it's a good movie, not because it's a Black movie. And so I think that what has happened is that A lot of us have unconsciously separated ourselves. And as a result of that, if you are not close to something or someone, you don't feel what they go through, you don't understand it, and therefore it has no impact on you. And so as we start to get to know one another and we start to see the things that we have in common, which is we truly are all humans. We all love the same and we all need the same and we all want the same. And when you fall in love with the fact that you care about someone or something, then you see them for who they are, right? You see them. You don't dismiss the fact that they're blonde or brunette or black or white or Asian. You see the whole person. And once you see the whole person, you start to care about the whole person. And again, that's why I appreciate what you're doing for yourself, for your audience, because it's important to know that just because we have different shades doesn't mean we all shouldn't have the same opportunities. We all shouldn't be treated the same. There shouldn't be a disproportion of Black men in the penitentiary than white. There shouldn't be a disproportion of Black people in organizations than there are of other races. There shouldn't be an economic disparity between Blacks and other races. That's because we see color. Because if we didn't, none of those statistics would exist.
I get that. Now I want to just touch on, you mentioned, being, a non-racist versus an anti-racist. And, I think a lot of people might be a little confused by that, saying, well, I'm not racist, but what's the difference between being a non-racist and an anti-racist?
It's interesting as I've been doing these talks because I have a lot of friends that say, well, I'm not a racist. And in those conversations, we've been talking about, well, what does that mean? Do you have racist people in your family that when they say those off-color or racist or demonstrative comments and or jokes, how do you handle that? And when I think about that just as a Christian, I have friends that are not Christian and they're still my friends, but they wouldn't dare say anything against God in my home or in my presence because they know that I don't stand for that. I think that the difference is, it's not what you're not, it's what you are. So if you are a non-racist, then are you standing up for that which does not represent someone who is an anti-racist? When you hear someone say something, your husband, your father, your grandfather, your mother, your friends, your colleagues, your cohorts, and you're in a room where someone is saying something that's inappropriate, do you let them know that that is not appropriate and you cannot do that in my presence? Because we forget that we have the power of influence. Change comes from love, right? And so if we love someone, we may not have been willing to make the shift for ourselves, but we would make it for someone else. I was sharing that I met a gentleman, fabulous gentleman, and great, we were dating, and I won't forget the time that we were out and there were some white people sitting at a bar, and he said something that was absolutely inappropriate. And we were sitting at the bar, and we were sitting at a table across from the bar. He made this comment about these white people sitting at the bar, and I looked at him and I said, "You're a racist." I just told him straight out, "You are a racist." Now, there are people there were two other people with us, and they were like, and I know that they would say that they're not a racist, but they didn't say anything. And I told him, "Look, you are a racist, and I don't do racism." I said, "So it's not appropriate for you to talk like that, act like that, or be like that in my presence." That's the difference. The difference is what we stand for or not. And I will not stand for racism.
As opposed to just being silent. That was actually a question that we had from one of our team members, taking it to the workplace. I would apply to me outside of the workplace too. If somebody's making jokes or you circulating, a meme or something. And, I think a lot of people they do get very uncomfortable and they just kind of back away from it. But really being an anti-racist is actually confronting and saying, that's not okay. And we will not tolerate that.
Right, and letting them know, but see, the thing is that when you are an anti-racist, all of the people who have fought for me to be in a position where I'm an executive living in South Orange County behind this bubble where we couldn't even own a home, they have been willing to stand for something. And oftentimes we want to be in that crowd. You hear me say it's better to stand for something and stand alone than stand for nothing and stand in a crowd. A lot of us don't have the courage to really stand. And so when someone looks at you, they don't know what you stand for. They don't know if you're racist, you're not a racist. And when people don't know who you are, they push the limit. So it's until you make it known who you are, and that doesn't mean you have to do it in a dogmatic or disrespectful or belligerent way, but you need to be truthful for who you are. And you will be amazed at how much influence that you can have. Because when I say to someone, when they walk in my house and say something, when I say, well, we're going to bless the food, well, here we go, we're going to bless the food. Well, you're welcome to leave, because in my house, we bless the food. This is what we do. Now that very person comes in and say, well, I was praying. So you were praying, really? Oh, okay. But it's out of the love that that person has for me that my voice matters. And it's a small thing. And even if that person is not a Christian, what they know is they cannot disrespect my home, or they cannot do or say certain things in my presence that's not appropriate. So I
Now,
think that's the important part.
in the workplace, I mean, we're obviously, our firm, we consider ourselves a diverse firm because we are, majority owned by women. We're certified women's business enterprise. Right now I think we're, over 70% owned by women, but at the same time, we can say we're diverse, but we don't currently have any African-American attorneys. And so, I want to bring racial equality to the workplace also. Definitely. But the question is, how do we go about doing that? Other than stating we want to do that and having, an open mind and open hearts, how do we go about doing that?
I think that's a great question, even down to what you're doing today. I think that you have to really define measurable and steps and actionable steps that you can take in order to create change in any initiative that you have. And we also have to understand where our limitations are in terms of what we are capable of doing alone, and get the support that we need when we decide that we actually want to move the needle forward and change, versus we're saying it because it's cute and sweet and thing to say. And so in some instances, even like I shared with you, you have to solicit the support from people like myself and other people who can help you go out and attract the talent that you want in order to strengthen your organization. Hey, let's be real. The brains that you and I have together is going to be far greater than you and I alone. It just is, because I'm going to be able to see your blind spots and you're going to be able to see mine. That's the reason why it was so important for men to start to bring women into the organization. Men are the headlines, women are the fine print. Together, we're a perfect read. We have an opportunity to come together and be able to see things from a different perspective. That means it increases our client base. It means that we're able to attract a higher level of talent in terms of our employee base. It's going to drop more money down to the bottom line. So by bringing in diversity in your organization of culture, then you have to get other people that are going to be able to support you through that process. Now, how do you do that? Well, you've got to be strategic. You've got to go into Black Student Alliance affiliations in colleges that most organizations are not penetrating. They're going to certain colleges and going to certain career fairs, but they're not intentional about going to Black Student Alliances in schools. Like I went to UCLA. I was valedictorian of my school in high school, but quite frankly, I got into UCLA because of the affirmative action. Quite frankly, it is what it is. And I would not have gotten in, even though I was qualified to get in to UCLA, but it was as a result of affirmative action, because there wasn't a lot of diversity, that I was able to get into the school. So it's tapping into programs like that have very, very qualified people that could come into your organization. It's making sure that you have affiliations with Black Alumni Association when you want to bring in a higher level of talent of people who are lawyers or whatever your industry might be, to the extent that you're going after and you want to be intentional. It's tapping into educational institutions that have a high population of Black people, or whatever race it is that you are seeking to diversify your organization with. Oftentimes, we tend to think we have to go to a specific school because it's the school that we've deemed qualified. But there are a lot of people who go to school and are great students and going to be high achievers in their employment place, but they couldn't afford to go to the Cornells or the USCs or the UCLA or the Princetons or the Yales or to the UCIs. They couldn't afford it. And so as a result of them not being able to afford it, they are naturally opted out of even opportunities from a career perspective. So being intentional about going to where they are, to the extent that's what you want. And then also aligning yourself up with other African Americans who will be intentional about supporting you during this initiative. And then measuring and tracking the progress that you make and holding your leadership accountable, tying it to compensation, having measurable steps that says, when we look at our clients, when we look at our vendors, when we look at our employee base, are we servicing all people? We say we're diverse, but what makes a woman predominantly female dominated firm any different than a predominantly male dominated firm? That's not diversity. And so we want to make sure that we can track it and that we're held accountable to accomplishing whatever our measurable and attainable steps are and the goals that we've set. And then you just start to count your wins. And before you know it, you'll be even better than you already are. You're already an outstanding firm. There's nowhere you can go but up. So, you know, those are some of the things that you can do to accomplish that.
That's definitely helpful. And I think, you know, reaching out to other people who can help us is definitely, you know, a high priority. I mean, I had shared with you that I'd already reached out to CEO of another organization that we're a member of and asked about vendors, you know, because we as a law firm, we have the opportunity to work with a lot of different vendors and trying to diversify the vendors that we use. And sometimes, you know, I'm going to be honest, our vendors are dictated by some of our clients. But I mean, I have no problem if we find, you know, a Black-owned vendor that we would like to work with, going to whatever client that is and saying, hey, we'd like to use this particular vendor. You know, we'd like to use them. Let's give it a shot and go to them, even though they have in writing that you have to use only these two vendors. I mean, because frankly, and this is kind of how I've lived my life, I mean, you don't get anything if you don't ask.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. And think about it. How did you and I get in the positions that we were in? It was an initiative that white men had in order to make more money. Women were climbing the corporate ladder and there was an opportunity. So, you know, you use what you have. More women were graduating from college. More women were penetrating the marketplace. More women were climbing the corporate ladder. It made good business sense, quite frankly, to give women an opportunity. It just did. Now, granted, we had to fight for our rights as women, and we had to try and do everything that we could to get the right to vote, to get the right to work, to get the right to have earnings. And, you know, we're still fighting the earnings gap because it's significant. We're still fighting the CEO gap when you look at the number of Fortune 100 companies through Fortune 500 companies and how many female CEOs there are. But we begin to make progress because there was a benefit. I think that what we have to understand, whether we like it or not, especially saying this as a Black person, is people want to know what's in it for them. Everybody is not coming from a humanistic perspective to change just because it's the right thing to do. Some people have to see why the change would benefit them. In some instances, we've changed because we didn't want to lose a relationship and we love somebody, so it caused us to change. You know, in other instances, it benefited us because we had a moral compass. And in some, it was a financial benefit. So we need to be strategic in how we go about creating change so that we can get more people on board and align them with the fact that everybody wins when we create change.
Don't you think, though, whether it's in a law firm or an accounting firm, and whether it's having women or minorities, I mean, there's research out there showing that there actually is financial benefit associated with that. But beyond that, it's just having the different experiences, life experiences, bringing all of that together makes the organization stronger as a whole.
Oh, absolutely. Unless you are a person who have become so complacent and have no desire to grow, then we're going to set those people aside. But for individuals who really want to be their best self, they want to be the best at what they're doing at their job. They want to make as much money as they can. They want to safeguard their family. They want to live with a high level of integrity. They want to be able to make wise decisions. You can't do that by yourself. You don't have the mental capacity to grow yourself up into becoming the best person that you can be. But when you surround yourself with 9s and 10s that come from diverse backgrounds, and you open up your mind to be able to hear things about yourself, to address the gaps within who you are as a person and as a leader, that's going to come from the diverse conversations that you have, because you would never think that way. And quite frankly, we tend to surround ourselves with people that are like us. Therefore, we are linear. We are not as broad-based in our approach. And so you only go after certain clients. You only hire certain people. You only have a certain strategy. So you're limited. But when you start to open up the floodgates, and now you have a diverse group of people around the table, male, female, different races, and you give up the right to be offended so you can have authentic conversation around strategy, running your business or running your home, oh my gosh, it's limitless in terms of the clients that you're going to attract, the human capital that you're going to bring to the table, the ability to see gaps and opportunities when it comes to operational efficiency. And of course, it's not going to do anything but yield you a high return in terms of your net income. So why wouldn't you do it? I mean, to me, it's kind of stupid not to. I'm just, I'm a business person, so it just doesn't make any sense. But I think it's because we don't want to admit the fact that in order to create change, we have to know that we don't have all the answers. But, I got off topic. I apologize. But to your
You're
point,
not off topic.
I think that it, first of all, for me, it's about the morality, so as you're learning about me, when I speak, when I have an opportunity to do something like this, I always want to know, what could I do to be better? How could I have done a better job of impacting you? Well, that means that I don't need to hear all of the amazing things about myself. I need to see the gaps and opportunities for improvement. Well, you can't do that unless you have people around you that are different. If you have a lot of yes people around you, or everybody is just used to stroking your ego and getting their stroke, then you better know your ability to grow is limited. And if you're still doing the same thing the same way you've always done it, better know that you're not growing. And so that's what happens when you have diversity around the table.
Now, let me ask where you're currently at. I mean, do you feel like, do you have anything in place in terms of diversity in your current position?
The company that I went to, candidly, I was at my former employer for 20 years. Mm-hmm. And an outstanding organization, had an opportunity to really have some amazing accomplishments, things I'm quite proud of. But the reason why I went to BPM LLP, this CPA firm, is because people matter, which is what BPM is. Because people matter, they live by it. And they have been intentional about seeking to understand that which they don't, even if they have not yet accomplished it, because people matter. They've been intentional about getting more women, and they've won a host of awards because people matter. They have been intentional about the strategy around the LGBTQIA community because people matter. And now they are intentional about understanding the Black community. And so it's hard, don't get me wrong. I'm their first Black executive in the organization, and I'm the COO. So I have a pretty high position. And as you know, I have a strong voice, and I'm creating some discomfort. But because people matter is really what you live by, then I should matter too. And so they're reevaluating their entire strategy to make sure that their inclusion strategy wasn't just around what was the buzzword, women and the LGBTQIA. But what I challenge them and all companies is that, are we really about inclusion? If it's inclusion, that's everyone who has been excluded. That's what inclusion is, right? It's all of those. So that's women, that's the gay and lesbian community, that's African Americans. That's what inclusion is about. It's not just about women. It's not just about the gay and lesbian community. It's about all of those who have been excluded, and making sure that they all have a voice, they feel safe, they can speak openly, and have a sense of belonging. So they're doing a great job at moving the needle forward, but I would be lying if I didn't say it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for me. It's really uncomfortable for me. So I know it's uncomfortable for them.
And I know, I mean, hearing you talk about, I mean, you cannot have just diversity without inclusion. I mean, it reminds me, I think it's Verna Myers, who has a very famous quote where she said, diversity is inviting people to the party. Inclusion is asking them to dance. So it's making sure you're saying, you got to give them a voice. You can't just go through the motions. You can't just have, a diversity and inclusion committee, but it doesn't really do anything, I mean, I know we want to be intentional about this. And I will admit, on behalf of myself, and I know others here, that we could be doing a much better job. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I don't want this just to be, we're having a conversation. And so we're recognizing it, but we're not actually taking action about it. Right. So that's, the commitment, I think from my steering committee, myself, that we do want to take action on it, and whatever steps we need to take to make sure we get there, because I wholeheartedly believe that our firm is also about people, and everyone matters here, and our environment and our culture of just, it's a culture of everyone. It's like a family. right? It's a
Mhm.
family where people care about each other, and we
Right.
want everyone to be their best selves. But I feel like for a long time, it has been in somewhat of a bubble, even though
Right.
we've been so wonderful with increasing women in the organization. And I think for us, a lot of it has been women have worked really hard and the men have worked really hard too, but it's been more of just, hey, who's the most qualified candidate for this particular position
Right.
without looking at gender or anything.
Right.
But now we want to go beyond that and want to look at race. Okay, we
Right.
have to.
Right. Right. No, you're absolutely correct. And I think that in order to do that successfully, again, and I say this over and over again, everyone has to give up the right to be offended and know that they're going to be uncomfortable. And this is why we don't change, because oftentimes when we talk about diversity and inclusion and we check the box, the diversity box, we then try and change the person who comes in that's not like us. So
Mhm.
now we're critiquing the way they talk. We're critiquing the way they think. We're critiquing the way they bring it to the table. Why? Because it's not the way we're used to receiving things. But in order to really have true inclusion, everybody has to change. You can't get married and then you have to do everything the way your husband wants you to do it, or he has to do everything the way his wife has to do it. Both parties have to change. You have to change for the common good of learning and growing. And what I have found in my career is because I have always been the only one that there's been this unspoken expectation of me to be different. So then you hear, and I hear this all the time from African Americans, well, she's too bold, or she's too aggressive, or she's too, well, what would it sound like if I said to someone, well, you're too weak and you're too passive? I can't say that to someone. So what makes the fact that I have a strong utilization of my voice bad if you have a weak utilization of yours? And I'm just saying, instead of us being able to understand that you have a style and I have a style, and we should be able to embrace one another's style. But what we do is we try and change people. And it's not just about Blacks. It could be anybody. I think the young people feel that way. I think women feel that way when they're dealing with men. I think people in different communities, in the LGBTQIA community, they feel that way. And that's not fair. We should be able to allow people, as long as we are respectful and we are operating with a level of professionalism and humility, we should be able to be who we are. We should not be forced to become who you want us to be. I mean, that is what slavery was all about. You're going to beat somebody into being who you want them to be. That is why that man had his leg on George's neck. I'm going to tame you into being how I don't move like the man is a dog. But we both know you'd have to be less than a dog, because we talked about this. If you or anyone in your audience saw a dog being beat down in the street, somebody pulled out a handgun and shot him in his head, you would be appalled. Tears would come to your eyes. You would be sad. And you don't have to be a dog to feel pain, but you would feel pain. You'd be hurt. And so we want to have the same level of love and consideration and acceptance across just the human race. But unfortunately, Black people haven't been able to get there. We just haven't, because we've been so dehumanized. And so I think that we want to be able to really start to reach one another and have these conversations. And that means we got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. That means we have to seek to understand versus try to be right. And then see what we can do to meet in the middle, and I think that'll make some change, create some
I
change.
I agree. I mean, now I think the understanding and the education at this point is so important for so many people. Are there any specific resources or books or anything that you've been recommending to people to help learn?
I think I tell a lot of people to start by reading White Fragility. I think that it really is very important there. And right now, you have to be blind and deaf not to see all of the options out there. If you watch television, they have a whole segmentation on Black movies. If you are going to the internet, if you go on Amazon, about books that you can read. Because in order to move from racist to non-racist to anti-racist. It's a process.
Mhm.
And the first thing you have to do is you've got to get curious. You first got to understand who you are and decide whether or not you are who you really want to be. And if who you are is not aligned with who you want to be and the story that people will tell about you at your funeral, then you've got to start making some shifts. And so we first have to come to a level of consciousness about ourselves. Then we've got to get curious and start asking questions and get vulnerable. So we've got to give up the right to be offended and utilizing resources. There's a movie out called When They See Us, and I'll follow up with the email and make sure I gave you the correct name. But it's called When They See Us, and it is about the life. And this is real talk. I live in South Orange County. I have a fabulous job. I'm in a very good income bracket. I have 3 great, wonderful sons. That movie is real for Black people. What Black men go through, and these 4 Black boys, and what happened to them. And I can tell you that I know people. The person my high school loved, I lost that very same way when you see that movie. And it talks about the life of a Black boy and what happens to him and how the world, the nation, the city, the police, what happens, how they take our life because we're of no value. And so I would say watch that movie and read that book, and then start to ask questions and have conversations, and then pay attention to your surroundings. Pay attention to your friends, to your family, to your inner circle, to the things that come out your mouth, the things that pop up on your sites, on your social media, the memes, like you said, the off-color jokes, and then pay attention to yourself. How do you respond or not? Pay attention to what you allow yourself to be influenced by. Pay attention to that, and then figure out whether or not you're comfortable with who you are. And then forgive yourself if you're not. And start to take steps to change. Start to use your voice to let people know that I don't like this about me. I was a cursor. And not that I don't curse, because I do, but I don't like it. It's not aligned with the kind of woman that I want to be. It's not aligned with who I want to be when I get to heaven. I don't want to be that person. So I have to check myself. I have to give people permission to tell me the truth about myself. To remind me, hey, you said you don't want to do that. So what are you doing? Don't use those words, or don't eat that food if you don't want to be working on your muffin top. Whatever it is, the change that we want to make, we've got to get accountability partners, because it's hard to change. And then you move to really, okay, now I want to be an anti-racist. Now, what more? Some people are behind the scenes. Some people are more comfortable on the front end. Everybody doesn't have to be out doing town hall talks like me, but you can have a town hall in your own home, with your own family, with your own husband, wife, your boyfriend, girlfriend. You can have it with your children. You can start to have those conversations. So those are some of the actionable steps that you can take, coupled with reading, and watch Black movies, ones that are going to educate you, the ones that hurt, the ones you don't want to see, like Roots. Watch those movies. Watch the movies about what Black people have gone through. Understand what they've contributed to this nation. Start to align yourself with your brothers and sisters, because we all should be equal. It's not about getting a handout or getting something extra. We just want to be.
Absolutely, really. Absolutely. I mean, I definitely think a lot of it has to do with the discomfort and starting, it's okay to be uncomfortable. I mean, That's to me is the starting point, just to have the conversations, you're right, that are uncomfortable. We have to have them, and I had, I talked previously about, I follow the teachings of, Maya Angelou, and I'm, a big proponent, and she has a saying that says, do the best you can until you know better. And then once you know better, then do better. And I like to think that, we're in the process of knowing better. And that's going to be, and it's not something that just, goes away with just reading a book or one conversation.
Right.
I mean, it is a process, but it has to follow with action. And again, it's not going to happen overnight, but it's something that it can't go away. We have to continue with this.
Well, the thing that you're stating is so good. This is a very great start, but we have to be intentional. right?
Mhm.
If you want change, you have to be intentional. It needs to become your lifestyle. And I
Mhm.
think that's the thing that people do not understand. I mean, people who work out regularly, it's part of their lifestyle. People who eat well regularly, it's part of their lifestyle. People who love music, it's part of your lifestyle. People who are, love God or whatever it's their lifestyle.
Right.
When you decide that you want to be a proponent for life, when you decide that you want to be a proponent for anti-racism, it becomes part of your lifestyle. And it doesn't have to be offensive. It doesn't have to be belligerent. It doesn't have to be disrespectful, but it has to be. And I think that that's what people don't do. They participate in these one-off things and then feel like they've gotten some gold star. But it really needs to become part of your lifestyle. My lifestyle is trying to shape and mold my sons to be the best person that they can be, and yet stand up for what's right. That's part of my lifestyle. My lifestyle is to be a purpose-driven leader and to be able to have these conversations and challenge people to think about the way that you behave, the things that you tolerate, not just what you say, but what you don't say. And what are you going to do that's different? When people see you, how would they describe you when it comes to racism? Will they know? Will they know if you're racist? Will they say, well, I don't really know if she is or she isn't? That's because it's not part of your lifestyle. And so I would say that, it's really, really important that whatever it is that we do when we say we want change, that we make it part of our lifestyle. But I just want to really compel to you and to your audience a personal plea for me and for my three sons that honestly, D, I can't do this without you. Like, I so need you. I need you. I need you. I need your friends. I need your colleagues. I need you because I got 3 Black sons and their life should matter. And I don't want to worry about my son when he leaves out of here to go to Newport or to go to Huntington. And I'm like, well, I really do. You have to go to Huntington, or that they're out. I want my sons to be able to drive while Black. I want my sons to be able to jog through the neighborhood without getting killed. I want my sons to be able to bird watch. I want my sons to be able to walk through the mall without somebody thinking that they're going to steal, depending on what they have on. I just want my sons to be able to have the same opportunity that yours would. Just things this basic stuff. And my sons are never going to have that if we don't get the help. And we need it. We need it, not just right now because of COVID and Black Lives Matter is the hot thing, but we need you to get passionate about this. We need you to tell one person. If everybody just used their power of influence with one person, we could change this world in so many ways. And I'm just asking, and I apologize. I didn't know that I was going to do this, but I'm just asking, if you care, then just show up. Show up in yourself. Let your light shine. Convert, change, and help us.
I want that
That's
too.
what we
I
need.
want that so much, and you have my commitment on that. And I know we're running short on time, but I want to make sure because you have an event coming up for Leadership in Heels, right? And I want to make sure for the audience that we let everybody know about that. It's on Thursday, July 16th, from 7 to 8:30 a.m. Pacific time.
Yes.
There's no charge to register, right?
No, there isn't.
And can you tell us what the event is going to be about?
Yes. So, as a result of COVID, sheltering in place, Black Lives Matter, what we all realize is that things will never be the same. And if they are, then, that's too bad for you. But really and truly, we all have to shift. We're changing the way we do business. We're changing the way we show up. We're changing the way we commune with one another. We're changing acceptance. We're looking at our normals, and we have to create a new normal. And in order to really change, in order to do the things that we're talking about, you've got to get bold. You've got to get bold. And so this event is bold leadership, going where others are afraid to go. To do what you're doing, Dee, it takes a level of boldness. To have these conversations, a lot of people are too scared. They don't know what to do or what to say, so they don't do anything. So we're going to be walking leaders through how do we create our new normal? How do we address the things that we need to address as a result of sheltering in place, as a result of Black Lives Matter? What do we do? How do we strategically start to move the needle forward and do what others are afraid to do? And so I have a DI consultant that works with organizations specifically around inclusion. I have another CEO who runs a company and who is very passionate about it. And then we'll be having some other panelists join us. And we're just going to have an authentic conversation around some of those of us who have been able to move the needle forward and progress, those of us that don't really know how. And Jessica, the consultant, is going to be walking us through some steps that we can take. And then how you're leading a diversity and inclusion director, chief officer of D&I. And so it's going to be a really great panel of people. And I hope that you and your team members are able to join us on July 16th at 7 a.m.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll forward the information to everyone.
Thank you.
Again, thank you so much for everything, Sherelle. Okay.
Thank you, Dee, for the opportunity. Thank you for everybody out there. If anyone has any questions or comments and would like to connect with me, you can email me at sherelle@sherellejackson.com or on social media, Leadership in Heels, on either Facebook or Instagram, or connect with me on LinkedIn. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate you, Dee, and anything that I can do to support you, I'm available to you. So feel free to reach out, okay?
Thanks so much. Take care.
Take care. Bye.